I collapsed during second period. One moment I was walking between desks, handing back graded essays on the Great Gatsby, and the next, the room tilted sideways. My vision tunneled, knees gave out, and I hit the linoleum hard. I remember the sharp scent of Expo markers, the startled gasp of a student near the front, and then nothing, just black. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed, an IV taped to my arm, and a slow beep echoing somewhere above me. My throat was raw, mouth dry like I'd swallowed cotton. A nurse noticed I was awake, smiled and said, "Welcome back, Mr. Mercer." It took a while before anyone explained what had happened. Autoimmune condition, they said. Something rare. My immune system had decided I was the enemy. They threw around words like crisis, inflammation, and liver involvement. I nodded, processing none of it. My body had gone to war with itself and lost. The room was sterile and quiet, a view of the parking lot through narrow blinds. I reached for my phone, instinctively checking for messages, only to find the small tray beside me, empty. No phone, no charger, no personal items. I asked the nurse about it. She checked her clipboard. "Your belongings weren't with you when the ambulance brought you in. No flowers, no cards, no visitors. 3 days in a hospital bed and not a single sign that anyone even knew I was there, especially not Melanie. We'd been married 6 years, not perfect, but not broken either. We had routines, weekend hikes, Thursday takeout, arguing about Netflix. I thought we were solid. I thought wrong. Every hour that passed without a call or visit chipped away at my assumptions. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe they hadn't reached her. Maybe her phone had died, or she'd been out of town, or... The nurse told me Melanie had been listed as my emergency contact. They'd left messages. She never called back. That night, I lay in bed listening to the machines hum, wondering how long it takes for a marriage to disappear, wondering if mine already had. Chapter 2. Silence. The hospital room phone felt ancient in my hand, heavy, beige plastic with a coiled cord that tangled like it had a grudge. I stared at it for 10 minutes before dialing Melanie's number from memory. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, familiar, but not warm. "It's me," I said. "I'm in the hospital." A pause, too long. Then, "Oh, yeah, I heard." "You heard?" I repeated, uncertain. "They said they called you." "They did," she said quickly. "I've just been overwhelmed." I waited for her to say more. She didn't. "I collapsed at school," I said, as if she didn't already know. "It was serious. Autoimmune something. I was out for 3 days." "Right," she said. "I've had a lot going on, Evan." There was something off in her voice, detached, like I was calling about a missed appointment, not waking from a medical coma. "I didn't know what to do," she continued. "You just left." That one stopped me. "Left?" "Yeah, Evan. One day you're here, the next, gone. No note, no message. I didn't know if you were coming back." "I passed out at work," I said slowly. "They called an ambulance." She exhaled sharply. "Okay, I've been trying to hold things together. People have been asking questions. I didn't have answers." I glanced at the wall, stark white, a smudge near the vent that looked like a fingerprint. "You didn't think to come see me?" I didn't know what to say. My jaw tightened. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse, just let the silence stretch between us until she finally mumbled, "I'm glad you're okay." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the receiver in my hand for a long time after that, not angry, not hurt, just hollow. It wasn't that she didn't visit, it was that she hadn't even tried to pretend. Like my absence wasn't something urgent, something painful, just an inconvenience to manage. Whatever had broken between us didn't start in that hospital room, but it sure as hell became visible there, and I was finally starting to see it clearly. Chapter 3. Reputation in Ruins. I was discharged on a Tuesday morning, wheeled out to the curb by a nurse with a kind smile, and a clipboard full of follow-up instructions I barely glanced at. My body still ached, muscles weak from inactivity and medication, but I was grateful to be breathing on my own, to feel the spring air on my face. What I wasn't prepared for was the chill waiting behind my front door. Melanie didn't come to pick me up. She texted, said she was in a meeting, and had left the keys under the mat. When I stepped into our home, it felt like a showroom, clean, sterile, untouched. My duffel bag from the hospital thudded onto the hardwood floor like it didn't belong there. No welcome home, no food in the fridge, just silence. I slept most of that day, woke up the next morning to a knock at the door. Our neighbor, Carol, holding a container of soup. She didn't smile. "I was surprised to see your car," she said, eyes darting past me into the house. "I just got home from the hospital." She nodded, but not like she believed me, more like she was humoring me. "Well, I'm sure you have a lot to work out." The next few days were more of the same. I ran into Steve from down the street while getting the mail. He gave me a stiff nod, said, "Hope you're feeling better," and then turned away before I could respond. At school, things were worse. My return was met with tight smiles and short conversations. The principal had reassigned my classes temporarily, and colleagues I used to eat lunch with suddenly had meetings to attend or papers to grade. I asked around. Nobody said anything directly, but the looks said enough. Then, on Friday, I got coffee with an old co-worker, Erin. She sat down across from me and lowered her voice. "I don't know what happened between you and Melanie, but people are talking. She said you left her, just walked out. No note, no explanation." My stomach twisted. "She said she tried to help you, but you disappeared. Everyone thinks you abandoned her." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just coming home from the hospital. I was walking back into a life that had already been rewritten without me. Chapter 4. The Web She Wove. It didn't take long to unravel, not because Melanie confessed, she never did, but because lies have seams, and if you tug at the right threads, they come undone. I didn't go looking for the truth right away. At first, I was just trying to rebuild normal, grading papers, returning calls, managing fatigue. But the unease lingered like a film over everything. People weren't just avoiding me, they were judging me, quietly, persistently, like I'd committed some invisible offense. I started paying attention. At the grocery store, one of Haley's friends gave me a look like I was something she'd stepped in. At school, the counselor, normally warm, kept her interactions clipped. Even the barista at the cafe I'd been going to for years hesitated when I ordered my usual, like I might explode. The tipping point came during a parent-teacher meeting. One of my students' mothers, tense and overly polite, said, "I just want to make sure personal issues won't affect the classroom environment." I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. That night, I went through Melanie's social media accounts. Most of them were private, but not private enough. She hadn't posted anything directly about me, but the subtext was a megaphone, photos of her with friends, captioned, "Grateful for the ones who stayed," memes about betrayal, healing, starting over, comments from her friends underneath, supportive, pitying. One read, "You deserve so much better than someone who runs when things get hard." The story she'd told was clear now, that I'd ghosted her after an argument, that I'd run off with someone, no name, just vague insinuation, that she'd been picking up the pieces ever since. I sat on the couch in the dark, rereading every comment, every message I could find. She hadn't just left me alone during a medical crisis. She'd erased the truth of what happened and replaced it with a version that made her the victim, and me, the villain. The more I pieced together, the more I realized how deep it went. The lies weren't just petty, they were strategic. She'd made sure by the time I came home, there was nothing left to come home to. Not my reputation, not my friends, just the wreckage she'd neatly arranged and walked away from with clean hands. Chapter 5. The Isolation Tactic. The silence was no longer circumstantial, it was strategic. In the first week back, I told myself people were just busy, distracted, unsure of how to talk to someone who'd been hospitalized. But by week 2, the pattern was too consistent to ignore. Friends who once texted me daily went dark. Group chats I used to be part of had either moved to a new thread without me or dried up altogether. I reached out to Brian, someone I'd mentored when he first joined the English department. We used to get drinks once a month, talk shop, complain about budget cuts, and standardized testing. He responded 3 days later with a vague, "Been swamped lately, hope you're well." I didn't hear from him again. Then came the email from the local community board. I'd been volunteering for years, working with a team that developed reading programs for underserved students. The message was short. Due to recent concerns, we're pausing your involvement until further notice. No explanation, no call, just a quiet removal. It hurt more than I expected. But the real blow came at school. 2 parents emailed the administration asking for their children to be placed in another English class. One cited emotional instability. The other just said, "Given what's come to light about Mr. Mercer's personal life, we're uncomfortable." The principal called me into her office. She was kind but hesitant, every word carefully measured. "I know this is a difficult time, Evan. Maybe it would help if you address the situation publicly." I asked what situation she meant. She didn't answer, so I tried. I started telling people the truth about the collapse, the hospital stay, the diagnosis. I told them Melanie hadn't visited, that she'd told a different story. But without proof, it all sounded like backpedaling, damage control. Even I started hearing the defensiveness in my voice, the desperate edge to my explanations. I could see it in their eyes. They didn't know who to believe. And the version they'd heard first was easier to swallow. The story of a man who ran away is much simpler than the one where someone gets erased while lying in a hospital bed. Chapter 6. What She Didn't Know. Looking back, it started small. Melanie used to leave her phone charging in the kitchen at night. Then suddenly it was always in the bedroom, face down, notifications silenced. She started working late more often, came home with excuses that were vague and polished, like they'd been rehearsed. "Client dinner," she'd say, or "traffic was a nightmare." Always accompanied by a quick smile, a kiss on the cheek, and no further details. I didn't press, not at first. We'd been married long enough to know the ebb and flow of life gets weird sometimes. I chalked it up to stress, burnout, maybe even just growing pains. But the distance didn't ebb, it expanded. Her laughter sounded different, less spontaneous. Conversations felt transactional. Her touch, once instinctive, became rare. Then there were the nights she didn't come to bed at all. Said she'd fallen asleep on the couch, said she was reading, said nothing at all. That's when I started documenting. Not because I wanted to catch her doing something wrong, but because something felt off, and I was tired of second-guessing myself. So I quietly reset the password to our home security system and linked the indoor cameras to a private cloud. We had a few, one in the living room, one in the entryway, and a baby monitor we never took down, even though we had no kids. Melanie thought they were still only accessible from her tablet. She never checked the settings. I also started backing up email threads, nothing invasive, just our shared financial records, utility bills, her calendar invites that were connected to our joint account. I stored it all in a secure folder, encrypted and time-stamped. Insurance, I told myself, just in case. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but part of me must have suspected that something was coming. A shift, a fracture. I didn't know the collapse would be physical, that my body would be the thing to give out first. That while I lay in a hospital bed hooked up to machines, she'd be out there rewriting our story. What Melanie didn't know was that I'd been watching long before I went silent, and I hadn't erased a thing. Chapter 7. Clues in the Cloud. 3 weeks after coming home, my strength finally caught up with my suspicion. I still tired easily, but I could sit upright at my desk long enough to scroll, to sift, to dig. And that's exactly what I did. The cloud backups had been running in the background for months, quiet, reliable, ignored. I opened the folder labeled HomeNet Archive and sorted by date. My hands moved slow, the muscle memory still stiff from weeks of IVs and hospital linens, but my mind was sharp, focused. I was no longer wondering if something had happened while I was gone. I was looking for how bad it really was. The first clip was from the night after I collapsed. Timestamp 12:43 a.m. Melanie on the couch, phone to her ear, laughing. Not nervous laughter, free, loose, like a pressure valve had been released. Her voice echoed through the living room. I feel like I can finally breathe, like I'm not babysitting anymore. There was a pause as the other person said something I couldn't hear. Then her again, quieter but clearer. He's not coming back. Not in any real way. She never mentioned a hospital. The next few nights were a blur of strangers, the front door opening after midnight. A man I didn't recognize, tall, sharp jawline, too familiar, a woman with heavy makeup and a laugh that scraped. They drank wine in our living room, played music. Someone used my Bluetooth speaker to stream a playlist called Unapologetic Vibes. I watched each clip twice. Never once did Melanie look like someone grieving a sick husband. She looked like someone celebrating a clean break. Then I opened our joint banking app, half dreading what I already knew. Transfers, multiple ones, small at first, round numbers, carefully spaced. Then a $7,000 move to a new checking account I didn't recognize. The account was listed under a name I'd never seen, but it was hers. I followed the trail. She'd opened it 10 days after I was admitted. I sat back, chest tight, throat dry. Not from the illness, from clarity. She hadn't waited for me to leave her. She'd left me first. Quietly, efficiently. While I lay unconscious, hooked up to machines, she'd started living like I was already gone. And now, so had everyone else. Chapter 8. Confrontation, or not yet. I almost said something that night. She came home late again, 9:37 p.m., hair done, makeup fresh, not a smudge in sight. Claimed she'd had dinner with a coworker, didn't say which one. Her shoes clicked across the kitchen tile like a clock ticking down to something inevitable. I had the evidence, the videos, the transfers, the conversation saved and time-stamped. It was all there, proof of what she'd done while I was lying in a hospital bed, barely breathing. But I didn't bring it up. Not yet. Because this wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't even about heartbreak. It was about knowing, about gathering the full picture before I made a single move. Melanie had rewritten the narrative while I was too weak to hold a pen. I wasn't going to let her do it again, not now that I had the ink. So instead, I started building. Every file I opened, I duplicated and backed up. Every clip, every document, every bank statement went into a folder called Continuity. I created a timeline, matching footage with transactions, dates with messages. I noted phone calls, calendar events, when she left, when she came home, who entered the house while I was gone. I even documented conversations. I'd casually ask her what she'd done on certain days I had footage for. When her answers didn't match the timestamps, I saved that too. I wasn't just collecting facts, I was recording inconsistencies. Lies she told without even realizing they were lies. She was confident, too confident, because she thought I was still weak, still recovering, still the man too tired to fight, too polite to push back. She didn't know I'd stopped being that man the moment I saw her smiling into a wine glass in my living room. I didn't want revenge, I wanted truth. And I wanted it all documented, airtight, undeniable. So when the moment came, and it would, I wouldn't raise my voice or make accusations. I'd show her who I'd become, and I'd let the facts do the talking. Chapter 9. The Real Story. I didn't plan on returning to the hospital. But I'd been feeling off again, more fatigue than usual, a slight tremor in my hands. My primary doctor sent me in for follow-up blood work, and I found myself in the same sterile building where it all started. Same white walls, same antiseptic air. At the check-in desk, the nurse glanced at my file and smiled. "Back again, Mr. Mercer. I remember you." I nodded, not entirely sure if I wanted to be remembered. "You're lucky," she said absently while typing. "You came in bad, real bad. Your wife seemed overwhelmed." I blinked. "My wife?" She looked up like she'd said too much. "I probably shouldn't." "It's okay," I said softly. I've never really known what happened that day." She hesitated, then leaned in a little. "We called her. Right after the ambulance brought you in. She answered on the first ring, said she was too busy to come in, said she wasn't listed as your emergency contact anymore." I froze. "That's not possible," I said. "She was my emergency contact." The nurse gave a careful shrug. "Well, someone updated your file. A week before your collapse. You weren't unconscious yet. We asked about contacting next of kin, and the chart already said none." I left without completing the lab work. The parking lot blurred through the windshield as I sat in my car, the engine idling. That wasn't neglect. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was intent. She hadn't just decided not to visit. She'd removed herself from the role of having to care. She'd known from day one. And while I lay unconscious in a hospital room that echoed with machines, she made damn sure no one could reach her, because she didn't want to be reached. She'd already started rewriting the ending of our story. Before I even knew, we were in the final chapter. Chapter 10, Quiet Moves. I didn't want revenge. I wanted insulation. The kind of insulation you build when you realize the person closest to you is the one holding the match. So I called a lawyer, not to sue, not yet, but to understand what was mine, what was shared, and what could be quietly unshared before the floor dropped out from under me. The lawyer's name was Delaney, sharp, soft-spoken, and thorough. She didn't flinch when I told her my wife had told people I'd abandoned her while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. Didn't ask if I had proof. She just said, "Let's make sure you don't get caught in a storm without an umbrella." We started with the basics. I rerouted my direct deposit to a new checking account in my name only. I moved recurring bills, utilities, insurance, even the streaming services, off the joint card and onto a separate one. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would throw up red flags, just quiet separation. I also updated my emergency contacts, for real this time. Then I started reaching out to the people who still made eye contact. My old department head at school, a neighbor named Tom, who had once helped me fix a fence post without being asked, a former student now in college who still emailed from time to time. I didn't explain much, just touched base, reestablished the bridge. Not everyone was ready to hear me out. Some still believed Melanie's version. But a few paused long enough to listen, and that was enough for now. Because I wasn't trying to convince the world anymore. I was preparing for the day it would convince itself, when the truth, patient and inevitable, would rise like floodwater, and the only question left would be who had built something strong enough to stand. I wasn't angry. I was getting ready. Chapter 11, The Evidence Package. I labeled the folder EM, Full Record. Clean, unemotional, like a case file. Because that's what it had become, my life as evidence. Truth, time-stamped. Inside it, I included hospital admission logs with the exact dates of my collapse and Melanie's absence, call records from the ER that showed she'd been contacted, screenshots of her financial transfers during the days I was sedated, social media posts with just enough implication to paint the picture she wanted, abandoned wife left to pick up the pieces. But the anchor was the footage from our own security system. The grainy, undeniable truth of Melanie laughing on the phone hours after my hospitalization, hosting people late into the night, smiling, drinking, dancing, in a house we were supposed to be building a life in. Her voice on tape talking about freedom. One clip in particular, she says, "He won't be a problem anymore." I watched it once, just once. Then I saved it, compartmentalized it, moved on. When the package was ready, I burned it to 4 identical USB drives. The first went to my school principal, the second to the head of the local literacy coalition, where I'd volunteered for 5 years. The third to a city councilwoman I'd worked with on a youth outreach initiative. The fourth to Melanie's sister, Rachel, a woman with sharp instincts and a quiet conscience who'd always hovered somewhere between loyalty and disbelief. No sender name, no message, just the truth. I dropped them in 4 separate mailboxes across the city. No fanfare, no confrontation. Just facts, released into the world like seeds scattered on hard soil. I didn't expect them all to land, but I knew some of them would grow. Chapter 12, Public Unraveling. It started with a text from Rachel. "Is this real?" Then the call from my principal. Her voice was soft, hesitant, very different from the clipped professionalism she'd used the day I was quietly sidelined. "Evan, I owe you an apology. I didn't know the full story." She didn't say the word sorry, but she didn't have to. She told me my classes would be reinstated next semester, that parents had been informed of a misunderstanding, and that she hoped I'd consider rejoining the mentorship program. Her tone was different now, respectful, careful. Then came an email from the community board, the same one that had paused my involvement. They asked if I was available to resume duties. No explanation, just the offer. One by one, the tide shifted. I heard through a mutual friend that Melanie had been pulling back from social events, that people were confused by inconsistencies in her story. Someone had seen one of the clips, no one said which one, but it had made its way into the conversation at a dinner party she attended. She left early. By the end of the week, Rachel called again. She didn't mince words. "She lied to all of us," she said. "And you gave her a chance to come clean. I respect how you handled this." I thanked her. I meant it. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't started a war. I'd simply shined a light on the mess she thought she could sweep under the rug. Melanie's story wasn't collapsing in flames. It was unraveling, quietly and completely, thread by thread, lie by lie. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight on my chest begin to lift. Chapter 13, The Collapse. She showed up at the house unannounced, hair pulled back in a way that tried to look composed but couldn't hide the shake in her hands. Her heels hit the porch with purpose, fury disguised as confidence. I opened the door before she could knock. "You think you're clever," Melanie snapped, storming past me into the living room, "sending videos, emails, violating my privacy? That's illegal, Evan." I closed the door behind her, calm, controlled. No fire in my chest, just the cool air of clarity. "You lied to everyone," I said. "All I did was show them the truth." Her eyes narrowed. "You were spying on me." "You lived in our house," I replied. "Those cameras were installed years ago. You knew they were there." She paced in front of the fireplace, too agitated to sit. "You've always been like this, paranoid, controlling, manipulative." I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I reached for the folder I'd prepared, one I hadn't needed to use yet, but kept in the top drawer of my desk, just in case. I laid it on the coffee table. Inside, the hospital records, bank statements, voice logs, timestamps, nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just reality printed and numbered. She didn't open it. "You're painting me as some kind of monster," she said, her voice rising. "You're trying to turn everyone against me." "They believed you without proof," I said evenly. "Now they've seen mine." She faltered for the first time. I saw it, the flicker of fear behind her anger, not because she was afraid of me, but because the scaffolding she'd built was buckling, beam by beam. I leaned forward, voice low. "I'm not going to humiliate you. I'm not sending this to anyone else. I'm not interested in revenge, but this ends here." Silence stretched between us. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "You ruined me." "No," I said. "You just stopped being able to hide." She didn't respond, just stood there, staring at the folder she refused to open, the walls she'd built finally crumbling under the weight of their own lies. A minute later, she walked out the door, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was the one leaving. Chapter 14. Aftermath. The divorce was quiet, clean, no court drama, no contested assets, just signatures on paper, split down the middle, at least on the surface. Melanie didn't fight. Not really. Maybe because she still thought she could win sympathy if she left gracefully. Maybe because she knew there was more I hadn't shared. I never needed to. Her reputation didn't implode. It eroded. The invitations stopped coming. Friends who used to echo her version of events stopped defending it. Rachel, her sister, told me at one point that even their mother had started asking questions Melanie didn't want to answer. She tried to bounce back, new posts, new friends, curated optimism, but something in her delivery rang hollow, like someone singing a song they didn't believe in anymore. Meanwhile, I started putting pieces of my own life back where they belonged. The school reinstated me fully. My classes were fuller than ever. A few parents even apologized, awkwardly, nervously, like they knew words weren't enough but didn't know what else to offer. Others said nothing, and that was fine too. I wasn't looking for apologies. I was rebuilding my name, not begging for forgiveness for something I never did. I started getting invites again to speak at conferences, to help lead the youth mentorship initiative I'd helped start years ago. My inbox filled up with messages from former students, friends, neighbors. One simply said, "We were wrong. You didn't deserve any of that." I didn't reply to all of them, just the ones that mattered. There were still quiet days, still moments when the weight of what happened settled over me like dust. But the difference was, I could breathe through them now. I kept teaching. I picked up photography again, just for me this time. Landscapes mostly, simple scenes, things that don't lie. Melanie faded into the background, not as a villain, not even as a warning, just as a shadow that passed through my life and left me with a deeper understanding of what it means to be alone, and what it means to stand alone and not break. I didn't get revenge. I got something better. I got me back. Chapter 15. Living Without Lies. Spring came slow that year, but when it arrived, it stayed. The kind of warmth that doesn't rush in with fanfare but settles in your bones like it belongs there. I started walking to work again, same path, same streets. But everything looked a little different now, sharper, clearer, like someone had wiped the fog off my lens. I was back in the classroom full time. The students never asked about what happened, though a few of the older ones looked at me differently, curious maybe, or just a little more respectful, like they'd heard the rumors, seen the quiet return, and drawn their own conclusions. I let them. Some things don't need correcting, they just need time. I started volunteering at the Literacy Center again. They gave me a Tuesday evening slot, helping teenagers prep for the SAT. It was the kind of work that didn't come with applause, but it mattered. It reminded me why I got into teaching in the first place, because words, when used well, can build entire worlds or dismantle false ones. And then there was the camera. I dusted it off one morning in April, the same one I hadn't touched in almost 2 years, took it up to the mountains just outside town, no agenda, no client, just light and landscape. I stood on the ridge as the sun broke over the trees and framed the shot instinctively, like muscle memory. Click the shutter. Let the silence wrap around me. That photo sits above my desk now, not because it's perfect, but because I took it for no one but myself. People still ask about Melanie sometimes. I just say it didn't work out, that we grew apart. And that's not a lie. It's just a version of the truth that doesn't need footnotes. I don't need to remind the world what she did. The world remembers on its own. Life didn't snap back like a rubber band. It unfolded slowly. A conversation here, an invitation there, the kind of healing that doesn't ask for recognition, just space to grow. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was no longer surviving. I was living. She tried to bury me with lies. But the truth doesn't stay underground forever. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.